Credit scores are dropping, guys. If you're familiar with the credit score world, you know that dropping is not a good thing. We generally want our credit scores to go up. The news that came out, or that came out again, was that average credit scores nationwide have had their biggest drop since the Great Recession. Now, that's the headline you'll see a lot of places, but what I actually saw is that there's a word that should be added in there, and it's credit scores have their biggest single year drop since the Great Recession, which is still not a good thing. That is a warning sign if I ever saw one. If you don't know how they measure credit scores, a lot of people, I made a whole video about this. There's a whole bunch of different types of credit scores. The gold standard for credit scores is FICO. It's made by the Fair Isaac Corporation. It is the most widely used credit score model. Usually FICO 8, but they are introducing a FICO 10T, which I still haven't had as much news on. I made a video on FICO 10T about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I was expecting to have a lot more knowledge about that than I have right now. So I will still waiting on that update for you guys. But anyway, the average FICO score nationwide dropped to 715, which actually, if that was an individual's credit score, that's actually a pretty decent credit score. Like, I would not be depressed with a 715 credit score. But yeah, it says in April 2025. This is why I'm like, well, this is really old news. April 2025. That's 2 quarters ago. We should probably have more updated news soon, if not already. So the average FICO dropped to 715 in April 2025, and that was down from 717 in 2024. That's a 2-point drop. And it doesn't seem like very much, but when we're talking economically nationwide, having a score drop that low is kind of a big deal. And then, again, it might seem small, but when we see that we haven't had a 2-year score drop in 20 years, kind of a red flag for the economy. This can be an absolute sign of an economic downturn. And we may be seeing more about this in the coming months, because when this kind of thing happens, the news loves to jump on it because they love to scare people. The thing is, whenever you hear anything about the financial world in the news, it's already happened. And so things could either be already getting better or they could be getting worse. But it is something to pay attention to. One of the possible reasons that has been speculated is causing this or contributing to it is that student loan delinquencies are part, but not all of the reasons. So people who thought that their debts would be absorbed, their student loans, by the Biden administration may have fallen behind and not caught back up, because the Biden administration a few years ago during COVID, they allowed them to pause. They wouldn't have to make payments. They'd have to start paying them again, but they wouldn't have to make them. And then Biden said that, oh, well, no, we're going to forgive them. But there's the whole thing that Biden can't forgive debts. Congress would have to do that. And so it never really happened. Just a general rule of thumb is don't trust what anybody says and always pay your own debts. Because even if you think that you're going to have the debt forgiven, or that if you think you're not going to fall behind, or you think you're going to catch up, you don't actually know for sure. So you need to always be prepared. Don't count on any grace periods. Just make your payment on time every time if you're able to, because that is the only way you're going to be able to guarantee that you're not going to find yourself in trouble or a big pile of stink later on. Not only will it protect you from troubles in the future, but if a large portion of the country has made bad decisions on their credit report during this specific time period, that actually looks really good on your credit report, that, hey, this candidate, they made their payments the whole time, which is above average for this profile of a person in going to college with their student loans and whatnot. Companies do look at credit scores that way. They do compare, oh, this is a rough time period where a large portion of people are struggling and not paying on time, but this person is standing out because during this time period, that's a rough economic time period, they are still making their payments. They look at it, they say, oh, they're a more reliable borrower. So another point about this topic is that the portion of the population that seems to be hit the hardest during this credit dive here is Gen Z. I have to say that millennials actually can relate to this a little bit. It's because it's just like you're 20 years behind. You're just like millennials were 20 years ago. They were just starting out in the Great Recession. Millennials got messed over. The credit was all messed up. Nobody could afford anything. You guys are going through the same thing right now, Gen Z. You're just starting out. You can't afford anything. Putting everything on debt. It's a mess. There's less overall employment levels. So if you're not employed, you're not making the money, you're not making the debt, you're taking out debt. It's a bad mix. And then Gen Z was also taken advantage of by something new that we did not see 20 years ago that we are seeing. I noticed about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Gen Z is being taken advantage of with predatory lending in installment loans. So installment loans has always been around, but you've almost never could find them anywhere except for maybe like the Home Shopping Network or QVC. And the way that they structure it is a little safer, but still higher risk than other types of credit. Over the last less than 10 years, I would say, we've really had the popularity of companies like Klarna or Afterpay, things like that, where they offer these installment loans. And they're not just offering them on high ticket items, they're offering them on fast food, on groceries. If you are paying installment loans on groceries, that is the number one most predatory thing I think I could even ever think of ever. And it's highly dangerous because if you're at the point where you're making installment loans on your groceries for the week, the overall likelihood of you being close to financial ruin is extremely high. And to have a company charging you interest on your groceries, it's very, 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 very dangerous. And quite frankly, I feel like that should actually be illegal. We're not there yet, but I would not be surprised if in my lifetime over the next 10 to 20 years, if there is a huge financial problem that happens, that we will see regulation on these companies outlawing certain practices that they are currently doing now, because this will hurt people at some point. I will say on the plus side here, overall, the average annual FICO score is significantly higher than it was in 2009. The average FICO score today, I said before, is 715. Even though it's dropped 2 points, it's still like a million times better than it was in 2009, because back then the average credit score, what can you guess? It was under 700. It was 687 in the 09 to 2010 period. And that is a huge drop. So 715, like, you're looking good. Like I told you earlier, I would not be depressed about that credit score. 687, you're borderline bad. You're like almost to decent, but you are so close to being bad. But overall, since that is the average score, we know that the health of our financials nationwide is actually doing pretty good. So this tells us that overall consumer health is still pretty darn good. Only time will really tell if things get better or worse. So let's hope for the better, but be prepared for the worst.